the other thing we've learned by watching dealers and dealer groups, that whatever your process is, you're going to just accelerate it. So if you have a bad process, you put AI in, you accelerate and do more of that. So you're just going to anger customers quicker.
What do most dealers misunderstand about starting AI in the service drive?
I think for AI to be useful in dealerships, you have to also change your framework from buying a product to testing and iteration. And I think AI is a collaborative tool, and you go back and forth with it. And just like hiring a new employee, you give it instructions. It may do an okay job. It may fail. It may need to be corrected. And I think when you approach it that way first, I think then you ultimately get better outputs. I look at service as a very big driver of the organization with lots of workflows, many disconnected currently, and lots of friction. So I think I would look at this area of the dealership through a different lens and saying, first, let me map all the workflows that happen inside service to complete a successful, happy consumer journey that's profitable for the dealership. And once I understand that, then I would look at, okay, what pieces or which processes can we apply AI over to have and reduce that friction? And I think if you, again, change that mindset from just, hey, I'm going to plug in a product, your outputs are so much better. I feel like service is the perfect place to do that because the number of workflows, the number of touch points with a consumer, the number of interactions, and ultimately profitability.
Do you think even if we take a step back, the customer loyalty has become more important as time has gone on, and that is indicative of the power of service to retain and the power of service to generate profit?
Loyalty has always been critical to any business. I feel dealerships by nature have been very sales driven. So they don't really think about loyalty. It's always been an afterthought. But I read a book probably in the early 90s called 1-to-1. Don Peppers and someone else, I can't remember her name. I think it was Sarah something. I'm trying to recall a old book from 30 years ago. But it was about the 1-to-1 future, even back then, which is kind of crazy to think at the beginning of database marketing. And I look at it as because you have to know your customers to know who's loyal. And many dealers don't prescribe to a data first mentality to truly know their customers and know who are the most loyal ones. And if you just pulled it just by how much they spent with you, that's not a holistic indicator. What I mean by that is, let's say you have a Ford store and someone comes in and does they have an F350. They do a whole engine, 16, 18 grand, whatever it is, 20 grand. And now you were very profitable on that transaction. They jump up to one of your most profitable customers, but they've done business with you once on an engine, and maybe they'll never come back. So understanding loyalty to me is critical. And in our business, so when I had my dealership, the first thing I did is I extracted all the data out of my DMS, and I did what's called RFM coding. Stands for recency, frequency, monetary value. I gave every customer in my database a 3-digit code. From a 111, my worst customer, not recently in, not a frequent user, spent the least money, to my 555, recently seen them, frequent user of my dealership, and spent money. So by understanding your customers in context, loyalty becomes much easier to understand and manage. So I think that has to be conversationally in an AI future, because you do want to be able to train AI on a deeper understanding of your customers. And to think AI is just going to naturally figure that out, I believe will be, again, gravely disappointed. AI is good at some things and terrible at other things. So this is one of the things where I think we're going to need human in the loop to make that work right.
At least the first cycle of phases where the dealerships that are willing to be first have tried and tested, have built and failed, have adapted and come back for at least a second or a third round. I'm interested, though, to understand What is it about the service drive specifically? I think a lot of even media and a lot of conversations happen around sales. Obviously, the question at the end of the day, as spoken by many well-known dealers, is, but does it sell cars? And so there seems to be the psychological angle in any case, focusing on that front end of the dealership. What is it about the back end that is so suitable for testing the data?
All those interactions are very powerful for gaining new insight. How did the customer interact with us? What did they buy? What didn't they buy? You know, what was their interval of doing these actions? You don't get that with sales. They come in, they buy a car. We're not going to see that cycle for 3, 4, 5, 8, 10 years sometimes. So you're not going to see that same amount of data and meet touch points. So I think it's super important that we look to service and that data capture to build a better understanding of our customers in the age of AI. So that's why it's like far more touch points. Yes, they're both transactional in nature, meaning they bought something from you. But when you line up more of them over a timeline, you have a much clearer picture of the type of person you're interacting with. So that's why I love service. I think AI inside service is going to be incredibly valuable. I won't say it's more or less valuable than sales, but what I will say is the amount of touch points are going to give us insights we've never had of how people are actually interacting with our dealership. And I think that's what we want and need to learn.
Context matters. Context really matters when it comes to AI. In the same way, I think a simplified version would be if you have a new employee, to take your example, they're starting out, you give them an instruction, they do what they can with the knowledge they have with the context. Sometimes the instruction we give is the problem. It's the lack of context that impedes them from doing or meeting your expectation, right? And so I fully understand that from a service perspective, the amount of data, the amount of context is really what's going to drive better understanding and better predictability. Sometimes you do need a spreadsheet and you do need to allocate codes in order to understand something that has traditionally been seen as not easily understood or measurable.
Yeah, it's so funny that, so when the RFM coding comes from the 60s and direct marketing. It's not even new technology, frankly. And I think it's applied in a new way, but the fundamentals of loyalty management have been around a long time. And it was originally, Libby was the guy who kind of created the RFM coding, and it was applied into the direct marketing industry. And I think that today we should all be applying loyalty and deep understanding of our customer database to help build better relationships, create more of that one-to-one future, which was promised to us over 30 years ago, but now is actually possible. And I think as you pull these things together, and in the age of AI is going to help us find the patterns that humans a lot of times miss. AI is going to help us kind of fill some pieces where, again, we just weren't able to see into the near future. But by understanding the patterns of the past and how the consumer's interacting with us, it will build much more accurate predictive models on how they're going to, and their future behavior. This will enable dealers to know and predict, okay, I already have, $2 million in service booked next month because I know these people are going to show up no matter what. And I think having that understanding through data is transformational. Right now, dealers have no understanding of that.
It's incredible. I can imagine just the impact that would have on resource allocation and planning, right?
Yeah.
Being able to predict to such a high level of certainty and allocate energy and outputs accordingly as well, which I understand is really challenging with the technician shortage. And then there's so much literature on this topic.
One more thing, right? Layered on a stack that's accelerating all sorts of ancillary things simultaneously in our lives, right? It's already on our phone, it's on our computer, it's recording this call and transcribing it and analyzing it. We're seeing it everywhere. And I think for people inside dealerships especially, look at this tool as a companion to empower you to do better be more efficient, be more effective, and ultimately help you do what you're already trying to do. And I think if you flip that from a, hey, this is going to take my job, to a, hey, this is going to empower my job, that I can actually work less or on deeper things, while all this repetitive type tasking is done with my companion, I think it is a mental frame change. And again, you're not buying or building technology to replace you. You're building technology or purchasing technology today to accelerate you.